And if we ignore the whole falling in love with a cardboard cutout with a wobbly foot part, I actually really enjoy getting there. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books. And today I'm going to wrap up the month of September and tell you about the books that I read. I got through 8 books in September. 2 were on my Kindle, 1 was an audiobook and the rest were physical books. I've got 2 5-star reads, 4 4-star reads and 2 3-star reads to share with you. And as ever, I'm going to start off with the 5 stars because they deserve the most attention. But please stick around for my 4 and 3-star reads because just because I didn't rate them 5 stars doesn't mean that you won't love them. So let's get to the books. My first 5-star read was Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, and this is a graphic novel. And I will preface this by saying that this is only the second graphic novel that I think I've ever read, so I don't have a lot of experience to, you know, compare and contrast and kind of rate it on its graphic novelness. But this is it's a graphic memoir rather than a graphic novel, and this is a memoir set in Iran. So I have read a few other Iranian memoirs and books set in Iran, and you know, I've read a lot of books, so there's that. This is Satrapi's memoir of growing up in Iran in the 70s and 80s during the Islamic Revolution, and also her young adulthood, or kind of teenage years and young adulthood in Austria, where she was sent to live apart from her family to finish off her education in a safer place, essentially. And I thought this was exceptional. It says so much, even though in kind of text speak it says quite a little. As you can see, I don't know if you can read any of that, but the illustrations are in stark black and white. And I thought that while the text tells, it's really these visuals that show. And combined, this is a really impactful book. Satrapi comes across really strongly, not only in her struggles and her observations of the political landscape, but also into her reflections on herself, her wit and her insight into her kind of sometimes bratish behaviour. You know, she's quite honest about some of the things that she did and said during that time, even if they hurt herself or others, or you know, they were actually quite dangerous. And because the backdrop of the political landscape is so imposing, it's really this reflection and honesty that really elevates this memoir and allows Satrapi to own her story rather than it overpowering her. Just my reading experience of this really moved me. Not only did it add another layer of my understanding of that time in history, but it's also really kind of unleashed a desire in me to seek out other graphic novels, which is something that I've never really been all that interested in before. So yeah, I absolutely loved this. My next 5-star read was a Kindle read, so I'll pop the cover up on the screen, and it was The Murmur of Bees by Sofia Segovia. So on the face of it, this is the story of the Morales family, narrated in old age by the youngest son, Francisco Jr., and it's about how they tried to survive as Mexican landowners through a civil war and increasingly socialist laws and powers, and they also lived through the Spanish influenza pandemic. But more than that, this is the story of the abandoned baby that was found in the undergrowth by an elderly nanny. Despite being confined to her rocking chair for, I think, decades, one night she takes it upon herself to trek into the outback, and she's found far away from home and cradling this baby who is disfigured and is covered in a blanket of bees. So he is taken in by the Morales family, treated almost as if he is another son in the family. They call him Simonopio. He's never without his protective swarm of bees, and his visions of the future position him as a protector of the family, not only from all the external threats around them, but an evil much closer to home. This book is stunning. It's got that perfect blend of magical realism and historical fiction that I really love. It actually reminded me quite a bit of Isabel Allende. I read The House of the Spirits, I think. Was that earlier this year or the end of last year? Can't remember. But much as when I read that and I learned a lot about Chile, which I hadn't known before, this book really gave me that same sort of insight into Mexico. But it never feels dry. It starts off looking like it's going to be a family saga, but it kind of quite quickly narrows down its scope to being more about Simonopio and particularly his relationship with Francisco Jr. and the role they play in one another's lives. I really liked the use of the elderly narrator looking back, because he was able to add his insight into things that he did and said as a boy, and it added a real sense of nostalgia and melancholy to the story, which made the ending even more of a tearjerker. This book is magical. I read the English translation of this book, so I can only be hopeful that it remains true to the original, but I thought it was beautiful and just so compelling, and I really want to read more of Segovia's writing. And my first 4-star pick was the Shelter Box book club pick for September, and it was... My version says Life as a Unicorn, but I have seen a yellow edition of this book, which I will pop up on the screen, which I think is just Unicorn. But this is the memoir of Amrou Al-Kadhi, who some of you might know as drag queen Glamrou, and I was so excited when this was the pick. I had voted for it. I was really glad it had won because it was already on my TBR. I had listened to Amrou on a podcast, I think it might have been The Guilty Feminist, towards the end of last year, and immediately stuck this on my Goodreads TBR because he came across, you know, really, I mean, he's just got a really interesting story anyway, but he came across really warm, really woke. I hate that term, but like, you know, really aware and just super interesting. So I definitely wanted to get to this whether it had been a book club pick or not. Amrou's pronouns are they, them and their, so I will really endeavour to try and remember that as I'm talking through. I've probably already slipped up, but I am trying to be mindful of that. And their story is just really compellingly told in this memoir. They bring together two cultures that I have really grown interested in recent years, and that is the immigrant experience and drag. And they do so in a really rich way. There's a lot of introspection, and they bring in a lot of their interests to illustrate points and show their kind of learning along the path of their life, and it just creates this really fascinating memoir that holds you right to the end. Amrou grew up in a Muslim Iraqi family, really close to their mother and quite religiously observant, but as they grew more aware of their sexuality and their gender identity, a void began to grow between them and their cultural foundations. Cultural and religious beliefs not only prevent Amrou's parents from accepting and understanding them, but also make Amrou question their own sense of worth and place in the world and everything they understand about themselves. This alienation drives Amrou to look for acceptance and belonging in some really diverse places and interests, which are fascinating to read about. So from punishing themselves to achieve academic excellence, to an interest in marine biology, to going to a really staid, old-fashioned elite public school in England. So if you're not from the UK, public does not mean what you think it means. Public schools are private schools, and he goes to possibly the most elite one. Sorry, they go to possibly the most elite one in the country, Eton, and then on to Cambridge for university, and then finally finds their real home in the world of drag. Each of these experiences promises and ultimately disappoints, teaching Amrou a lot of things along the way, and as a reader I learned a lot as well. This is a brilliant memoir from a really unique voice. I'm incredibly glad that I finally got round to reading it. Amrou is funny, fiercely intelligent, and you know, sometimes toe-curlingly honest about things, and I just absolutely loved this memoir. My next 4-star read was actually my only NetGalley that I got to this month, just because in my new job I'm not having as much time to read, and also because I subbed out a NetGalley for the book I'll come to after this one, and you'll see why. But my next 4-star read is Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan. Now, I've read a couple of O'Hagan's books previously. One was a novel, one was a piece of non-fiction work about missing people, which was this year, so I have included it in a previous wrap-up, which, if I remember which one, I will post the link in a card above and also in the description below. I really enjoyed both of those previous books, so I was really excited to get to this one. I was really glad that Faber and Faber sent me a copy in return for a review, and I think probably the premise of this book would have grabbed me even if it wasn't Andrew O'Hagan who had written it. So this is about essentially two boys, Jimmy and Tully, and it's told in two time periods. The first is 1986. We meet them as young men. Jimmy is 18, he's about to go off to university, and he's living in Ayrshire alone at home after his parents have abandoned him to go and pursue their own interests. As a result, he spends an increasing amount of time with his friend Tully, who is older. I think he's 20, 21, and he's kind of taken in by Tully's mum as well. Tully's father isn't that keen on this. He is a disgruntled former miner, and his decline and disinterest has cast quite a shadow over Tully's sense of self. So like I said, he's in his early 20s, he's working a manual job, and he desperately does not want to become his father. We travel with the boys and a group of friends as they go down to Manchester for a music festival, and it's full of all those kind of iconic names like the Smiths and New Order, and in that we get to see the boys in their full glory, you know, their political ideals, their humour, their gallus, fun-loving, big drinking ways. And then in the next part of the book it's more modern times, and the guys are in their late 40s, and Tully rings Jimmy and he has some devastating news. This story is really a deep dive into friendship and how, you know, one person can really shape your sense of self and your place in the world. The friendship between Jimmy and Tully is equal parts hilarious and touching, and O'Hagan captures that sense of exuberance and bravado that I've seen is so typical of the friendships with young men, but also that kind of vulnerability and passion for the future that you can share when a friendship is solid and secure. I don't think I've ever read such a beautiful male friendship before, and I really loved that was the core of the story. And so then in contrast to all the jokes and the good times of that earlier part, the second half is really a gut punch, because in a true test of friendship, Jimmy is asked to make and honour a promise to Tully. This is done really sensitively. It's no way like cloying or saccharine, and was a really realistic portrayal and stayed true to the young men that they had been shown to be in their younger years. The themes in this book really struck a chord with me, and I really enjoyed this. Although I'm not a man and I'm not old enough to have been at a music festival in 1986, I really connected with that sense of the carefree and wildness of youth, but also the kind of adult realizations that come at that time also weighing heavily on you. And then I also really felt that passing of time and the way that life throws things at you that you would have never expected. And I just felt like overall this is a really touching book. And the reason I didn't get to any other Net Galleries this month is because I decided to read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And again, this is a 4-star read. I think the single most important thing to take away from this book is that there really is no such thing as being not racist. You're either racist or you're anti-racist, because the stance of being not racist without directly opposing racist policy or ideology means that you are complicit in racism, because you are not putting up any resistance to that. And it's that permissiveness that allows racism to flourish. But while that's like the most important learning to take away, it's not the only learning. This book is a deep dive into loads of different facets of racism, some of which I was aware of and had considered, some which were completely new to me. And interspersed in between these is Kendi's own experiences of growing up as a black male. And while this is very grounded in the American experience, I think a lot of the themes that it brings up are pretty universal. Obviously, I'm a white woman and I am working to educate myself to really become fully anti-racist, and so this book was perfect for me. It is a deep dive. This is not a primer, but I did really appreciate the interwoven aspects of Kendi's own story, because it did help me to enjoy a little bit more the political and historical and more academic sections of the book, whilst also allowing me to see the lived experience within that prejudice. Some of the issues raised, they really took me aback, particularly the fact that so many racist stereotypes and understandings that we have are based on completely false science from hundreds of years ago, and that's on which a lot of power structures and policies still hang their hat. And it made me feel so ashamed to be part of a society that still perpetuates those lies in order to keep white supremacy flourishing. I listened to this as an audiobook, and I think for me that was probably the wrong choice, because I really wanted to refer back and maybe take certain sections a little slower, and I couldn't do that with the audiobook. I also had a slight issue with the narration. I think it might have been Kendi himself that narrated it. I'll check that and put it up on the screen. And although he has a beautiful voice, there was something a bit off about his speech patterns, that it just didn't really flow. So I will be looking to pick up a print copy of this book in future, because I definitely want to revisit it and, you know, really get my head around some of those more complex concepts that he discusses. And I just think this is probably a book that needs more than one reading anyway, because there is so much complexity in it and there's so much to take in that you would never just be able to, you know, do it and done in one sitting, I don't think. But yeah, really, really important book for those of us who want to educate ourselves, and I'm really glad I read it. And then it was back to memoir and back to Scotland for my last 4-star pick, which was All Made Up by Janice Galloway. I read The Trick is to Keep Breathing by Janice Galloway last year, which is a novel about mental health. I really liked it, and this is the second of her 2 memoirs. Her first, which is called This Is Not About Me, covers her early childhood, I think. This one looks more at her later childhood, teen years and young adult years. I haven't actually read the first one, so I was a little bit anxious going into it that maybe that wasn't the right way to do it, but actually now I've read it, they absolutely can be read out of order. I enjoyed this just as much as I enjoyed her novel, where she's turning the lens on herself and her own difficult childhood. She grew up in a small flat, having to share a bed with her mum after her much older sister has returned home after abandoning her marriage and child. But she does cast quite a shadow on Janice's life. Janice is trying to be a good student and a good daughter, but all the while she is facing constant criticism and sometimes even abuse from her sister. As a result, she becomes really unsure of herself and looks for a sense of worth, a sense of belonging in other things. She finds solace in her love of studying Latin at school, being part of the school orchestra and reading. But these passions only kind of serve to make her sister even more spiteful. And in the meantime, her mum doesn't really do an awful lot to protect Janice. This is the sort of memoir that really drags me in. You know, it's got unflinching honesty and introspection, and it helps you to really understand the foundations, you know, like the starting blocks from... She's an impressive woman, and you know, it's the starting blocks from which she kicked off from. There's tough stuff to read in this. It can get quite bleak. Some of it really did resonate with me quite strongly, but it is balanced out with humour and writing that's got like a real clarity to it, plus Scotland. So I really liked this, and I do have, I don't know if it's on this bookshelf, maybe it's still upstairs. I do have the first memoir as well, so I really can't wait to get to that. And now onto my 3-star reads, the first of which is still in Scotland, and it was The Whole Story and Other Stories by Ali Smith. This is my 3rd Ali Smith, after The Accidental, which is the first one that I read that I only gave 3 stars as well, and then Hotel World, which I think it was a 5-star. And you know, I like her. I don't love her in the way that a lot of people, particularly on BookTube, seem to do, but I really want her to win me over. I want to love her, so I'm going to keep going with her books. So this is a short story collection, and like a lot of short story collections, apart from some really beloved exceptions, I found that there are peaks and troughs in this. There are some stories that really really excited me, and then other ones that I just didn't gel with at all. And sometimes that happened within the same story, like a story would have a really strong part and then a bit that was just like, oh, okay. I think it's because I think Smith's writing does seem to have a bit of a touch of weird to it, and I have to really be in the right mood for that. So it might just be that I was not in the right mood for this book, this collection in its entirety. I think it's just little things like, I don't always need a neat conclusion. I don't need things wrapped up in a tidy bow all the time, but a lot of these stories just felt a bit unresolved, and it was quite frustrating the more times that it happened. But what wins me over is her wit and her way with words. It's really something special, and she's so good at summing up the kind of, I don't know, Scottish experience, sometimes in as little as, you know, a couple of words, and I think that's fantastic. And I think that's what keeps me holding on to her and holding out hope that one day she will blow me away. But for now, 3 stars. And then my final read, I finished this last night, is also a 3-star read, and that was Water for oh god, it's very shiny. Water for Elephants by Sara Gruen. Gruen. Come on guys, I made it this far without fucking up a name. So I can't think what made me pick this book up. I've never seen the film. Never really been interested in seeing the film, and obviously, as you can tell from this movie tie-in edition that I've got, it's very romance focused, which isn't something I'm particularly interested in. I can only assume that I heard it recommended maybe on a group in Goodreads that I was in. And I suppose this is the 3rd book I've read this year that has a circus in it. I've read the Night Circus and I read the Gracekeepers, so there's obviously something in me that's really drawn to the world of the big top. So this story opens with Jacob, who is a 93-year-old man. He's very crotchety and he's in a nursing home, and he totally loses the rag with a new resident who claims that in his youth he worked in a circus and carried the water for elephants. And actually, now I'm thinking on that, you never find out why he gets so angry about that. I'm assuming it's because elephants drink so much water you couldn't carry the water. You'd have to like wheel it in or something, but actually I don't think it ever addresses that, which is so annoying. Where was I? Yes, so what follows is a combination of modern day Jacob in the nursing home, struggling with old age and really wanting to go and see the circus that has pitched up at the end of the road where his nursing home is. And then it's also got flashbacks to Jacob in the 1930s. It doesn't say Depression era. I think that's the 30s, isn't it? Back to the 1930s where Jacob was studying veterinary science at quite a prestigious university when suddenly both of his parents are killed in a car crash, and he kind of just drops out. Their family home is repossessed and he ends up homeless, rudderless, and ends up hopping on a train which just happens to be a circus train, and he ends up joining the circus. And this is a world with its own kind of very divided class structure. It's run by this tyrannical ringmaster called Big Al, and there's also an equestrian director called August, who is riddled with like anger and behavioural issues, and who just also happens to be married to the woman that Jacob falls head over heels in love with. At its core, this is a romance novel, and I'm not really a romance reader, but thankfully it's got a lot of other things going on to make it a bit more interesting. And actually that's a good thing, because really the romance is it's quite a clunky plot device. And actually it was what weakened the book for me, because I feel like Marlena, who is the love interest, just isn't interesting. But that's really frustrating, because she could be. You know, she's super talented, she's in this strange relationship with this monstrous man, and she's so alluring that Jacob is like willing to risk potentially even his life for her, but we don't see any of that. Just like beyond what Jacob tells us, all we really learn about Marlena is that, you know, she jiggles her foot when she crosses her leg, and she crosses her leg a lot, and but what kept me reading was the circus, and Rosie the elephant in particular. There is foreshadowing right from the beginning of the book. We know a disaster happens, and it was that kind of kept me reading. I wanted to know what happened. And if we ignore the whole falling in love with a cardboard cutout with a wobbly foot part, I actually really enjoy getting there. The world of the circus is fascinating, and this book really draws that out. It's very much behind the scenes. We don't spend a lot of time ringside. So if you're looking for like magic and daring deeds, this probably will disappoint, but I absolutely loved that. So this book scratches kind of like the circus and adventure itch, but I think it's lacking on what it really seems to sell itself on, which is the romance. It does also have some questionable handling of mental health issues and issues of race. I didn't know how to feel about that. I don't know if it was just because of the time period in which the book is set. So yeah, it's just, I'm really unsure how to feel about this book. So that's essentially why I've given it 3 stars, but I did enjoy the reading experience. So sometimes a book doesn't have to be great for it to be fun, I suppose. So those are all the books that I read in September. Have you read any of them? What did you think? You know, trash the ones I loved and love on the ones that I've trashed. It's up to you. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I love to chat books. And I'm losing light quickly here. You can definitely tell that we're getting into autumn because it is getting dark. It was blazing sunshine when I sat down to start recording this, and that was only like half an hour ago. So yeah, I think I'll wrap this up here. If you are new, I would absolutely love it if you subscribed. Yeah, so hit that wee button down there and come and join me. And until next time, bye. But the illustrations, my nails are horrendous. Let's not hold it like that.